Welcome to another episode of We Don't Die, where my goal is to give you evidence that although our bodies will disappear, we survive physical death. When we aren't afraid of death, we are less afraid of life. From these episodes, I aim for all of us to take more risks in life, go after our dreams, have great relationships, and some joy in the process. I'm your host, Sandra Champlain, author of the international bestseller, We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. Today on our show, we have Pam Kircher. Pam is a retired holistic family doctor and hospice physician. Her near-death experience during an episode of meningitis at the age of 6 had a huge impact on how she has lived her life and formed her ideas of life after death. In addition to being a doctor, she has written a book called Love is the Link. A hospice doctor shares her experience of near-death and dying. And she's given many talks on near-death experiences and death and dying. For the last 15 years, Pam's interest has been in Tai Chi for health and has led her to teach over 100 instructor workshops and educate the public and healthcare providers about the benefits of Tai Chi. 3 years ago, she studied transformational hypnotherapy and has used it to help people get in touch with deeper parts of themselves, including past lives and the life between lives. Now, at the young age of 70, she is exploring living a quiet life in nature in Colorado with personal meditation and Tai Chi and occasional sessions of transformational hypnotherapy. Pam Kircher, welcome to We Don't Die Radio.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Oh, I'm thrilled to be here. And I took a quick peek at your website, pamkircher.com, and I'll share with the listener a little bit more about that later. And you are just one extraordinary woman who's got so much more behind her than just the paragraph I just read. Would
Thank
you,
you.
You're
Yes.
welcome. You're welcome. Would you tell us a little bit about yourself? You're in Colorado right now. Is it a bright, sunshiny day?
No.
No, it is here in Massachusetts. What do you have when
Usually in
you?
Colorado, I live in Southwest Colorado, and it's almost always sunny. But we are getting the aftermath of that last um, uh, hurricane. So right now it's cloudy, but the summer colors are beautiful.
Oh,
The fall colors of the yellows and the oranges, they're just magnificent.
yeah, that's my favorite time of the year when I can see the leaves change, reminding us that everything changes. So a little bit about you. I'm very intrigued about that you had a near-death experience at a very young age. Would you take us back to that and what you remember?
Yes, I will, because I think it does have a huge bearing on my attitudes towards life after death.
Right.
And I'll just tell you a little bit about that experience. I had just turned 6 years old, and I started off with a sore throat that turned into a headache and the dizziness and the stiff neck of meningitis over a couple of days. In those days, so long ago, people didn't go to the emergency room easily. We waited till Monday morning to go to the doctor.
Wow.
And at that point, he said, I'm not sure if she's going to live or die.
Oh my.
And but gave me a shot of penicillin. And somewhere in the middle of all of this, and I don't know exactly the moment of it, but I remember lying in bed and being in the excruciating pain of meningitis. And then suddenly being outside of my body in the corner of the room, in the upper corner of the room, and just suddenly feeling the essence of myself. And it was not surprising, it was simply wonderful and natural to feel that essence of myself. And I felt myself surrounded by God in just this place of perfect peace. And I knew in that moment that this was who I truly was. This was who I was before I came to Earth, and it was who I would be when I went home.
Wow.
And that at my best, it would be who I remembered I was during this lifetime on Earth. So it was that moment that I really felt that expanse of time. And I had no, that was the short experience that I had. And then I looked down and saw a little girl on the bed, and I felt compassion for her. I could see she was in pain. And then I remembered, it just came to me that, oh, of course that's got to be me. And in the moment of thinking that thought, I was back in my body.
Wow.
I had no doubt about the reality of the situation, that had been real, it had been a gift to me from God, and that it was actually something that I didn't need verification from other people to believe. And this was back in 1950, when indeed the very word near-death experience wasn't going to be coined for 25 years.
Right.
And so it was not anything named, and yet, and I felt like most of the people that were around me would not understand it. They would think it was something else, and yet, and that that they'd have to fix me in some way because I was only 6. But I remember very clearly saying, no, this is my experience, and I know it's real. So I never talked about it till I was 42 years old.
And let me ask you, Pam, I've heard this from other people that have experienced, had a near-death experience. You know, we all have memories from our past, but those that have had near-death experiences remain very vivid in your memory. Is that the same with you?
Absolutely, and it never changes, unlike fish stories. They get longer and
Oh,
longer.
I've got plenty of those. Sure do, with actual fish. But yes, so
And you can almost hear as I tell the story that it's told from the point of view of a 6-year-old, because that's indeed who I was. And so I want to give it the essence of what it felt like to me at that time. So it's never changed, and it's been the single most powerful moment of my life, and how it has impacted everything about my life, and most particularly most particularly is, of course, there was no fear of death after that, because I feel absolutely certain that I really am that soul that came, and I really will be that soul when I go home, and that is home. That sense of really being at one with God.
That is absolutely beautiful. And yeah, I think I know the answer to this, but can you see how that experience shaped who you were to become in life?
Absolutely.
Can you share about growing up, and I'm assuming that maybe you wanted to be a doctor, but maybe you didn't before that. What was that like as a kid when you were getting older and it was time to go to school, and how did that sense of compassion and knowing about life after death and maybe even having the meningitis shape you into who you became?
Well, for one thing, I don't know who I was before that, because that's what people who have near-death experiences often talk about, how it changes their lives. Well, I can't really remember any particular values before I was 6 years old.
Right.
So it's the only way I've ever known life. It's the only way I've known life is as a near-death experiencer. And as a child, actually, my hero was Albert Schweitzer, the medical missionary in Africa.
Yes.
So that really was my hero. Those were the kind of, that and Gandhi were the games I played as fantasy games. And so I really took in being of service to other people, which is one of the things all near-death experiencers do. Um, so that was a huge piece for me. Another huge piece that was kind of muddled in my brain as a small child was that I was extremely empathic with other people, and that means that I could also feel their pain. And it always amazed me how cruel children can be to one another.
Definitely,
And I
definitely.
observe that, and I think if anyone else is feeling what I'm feeling, they couldn't do it because they'd be feeling what they're doing. And so I knew I was different in that way, and it wasn't until I was an adult and actually came out, as you will, as a near-death experiencer, that I met other people like myself and realized that extreme sensitivity and empathy is very common to near-death experiences. So that I wasn't unusual, but it was difficult being a child, really. And I was always interested in meaning in life, and most kids aren't.
No.
So I was a very different child, and I consider it sort of blessed to have not been teased and ostracized and all that. But some of that was because I never spoke of what I felt,
Right.
because it just didn't feel safe. So becoming an adult was easier because I could then I could let all this unfold. That was what I had learned in my near-death experience about really just relaxing into recognizing that we're all one, and that my being in the presence of God, I knew for sure all souls were, and that's really who we all are. And I didn't have to feel competitive or anxious or striving too hard. And so that sense of freedom that came with my near-death experience allowed me to really let my soul unfold and do all the parts I've done. In my 30s, when I turned 30, I went to medical school and at Baylor and became a family doctor. After that, my residency was in family medicine, and really enjoyed having a mind-body practice. But after I did that for probably almost a decade, and then toward the end of that, I read Ken Ring's book, Heading Toward Omega, about how people change with a near-death experience. And it just totally changed my life because I realized there were other people like me out there. And that wasn't until 1989 that I read that book.
Wow.
So until that time, I thought I was probably the only one on earth
Right.
who was all that stuff.
Yep, you're alone in it. You're different. Keep
I'm not
quiet.
talking about it.
No, of course
Uh,
not.
so I just it was a very private experience for me until I read that book, and even then it might have been private, but I realized in reading the book that because I had become a doctor, in those days people were not nearly as aware of it as they are now. And I thought, you can't just be a doctor and not say that you're also a near-death experiencer, because that would really help the public see that these people are not crazy out there, or they're the people that you're rubbing elbows with every day when you go to your doctor or you go to the grocery store or whatever. There's lots of people who've had a near-death experience out there.
Well, for me, my show is fairly new now, and I am getting flooded with people that would like to be on the show. And I'm a yes to everybody. It just takes time. But it's amazing to me, professors, doctors, clergy, I mean, people that have regular jobs, all kinds of people that have, many have books, but many have never come forth before. And there so many more people have had near death experiences or something like, I don't want to say like that, but some interesting experience, whether it's knowing who's on the phone before the phone rings, or there's some things that people have shared that they haven't come out, whether it's because of fear, what will people think, and the more and more and more these stories come out, I think the better it will be for humanity to know this is real and don't be afraid. You're
Mhm.
not alone.
Right. And I've seen such a huge difference in the 25 years since I've been talking about near-death experiences in people talking about it just with one another in casual conversation or just insisting on the right to have their own experience
Yes,
and have it not be called crazy.
right. Yeah.
It's been wonderful to see that change in the world.
hmm And I
Yeah,
think it's really just the beginning in the big scheme of things to
ab-
what's to come. What made you become a hospice physician?
well, it was because I was starting to um, talk about the near-death experiences, and I'd always done some counseling, and I started getting a lot of grief counseling, people coming in for grief counseling, and it's kind of the way all my life has worked is that then there's the practical factor of HMOs and now PPOs. We're
Right.
coming into Houston, and when anything is new, it's always a mess,
Right.
a bureaucratic mess. And so what had been a really lovely practice I thought I'd be doing all the days of my life,
Yes.
just a living hell.
Uh-huh.
And it was just because it was just the bureaucratic ladder of trying to get all this stuff done when they were trying to bring it into the first big city stuff.
Sure.
So I was unhappy with that, and I was unhappy, and I went to bed one night, and I do this frequently as I prayed to have an awareness during the night of how to release this discomfort I was feeling at work, whatever, and I was open to whatever spirit offered. And lo and behold, I was awakened in the middle of the night, and I call it awakened. It wasn't like I woke up. I just felt spirit nudge me.
hmm
I went and got and it said go get the newspaper out of the trash of it's the Harris County, Houston doctor's letter, and there was an advertisement for a hospice doctor right there in my own hometown,
Wow.
and I knew in that moment that's what I was meant to do. So I called them up the next day. They interviewed me. They loved me, and they hired me on the spot. And I transitioned over the next 3 months, getting really good docs for my patients from where I was. And that's how I became a hospice doctor.
And how long were you a hospice doctor?
I did that. I did it for 4 years. And then at that point, my husband wanted to move to Southwest Colorado.
Okay.
And he'd been living in Houston with me for quite some time, not liking the heat in the big city.
Right. It is hot and it is a big city.
Exactly. So I said yes, and so we moved to Southwest Colorado. And again, I think it's that near-death experience that allows you to take life fairly lightly because you know it's one stretch in the continuum of a whole soul. I thought I'd be able to do hospice. It turned out that just was never a choice. And I was kind of at sea for a while. I wrote my book and worked as a family practice doc, but it was in a clinic, and it wasn't quite right. And then the opportunity came to become the medical director of the hospital in Durango.
Wow.
And I was able to bring in integrative medicine into the hospital and develop a wonderful touch, love, and compassion program that's a real model for the country. But because until then, everybody said, "Oh, you can only do it in the medical centers," and we are no medical center here. And so it's just I've had a really, and then when that got done, and it was just wonderful and became a central piece of the Hospital of Mercy. then the Tai Chi for Health thing opened up. And so I helped to get that program started in the country. And then this last year, I just heard Spirit say, well, it's time to let that go. So now I'm in this place of quiet of just doing nature, as you said, as you said in the introduction. So I have allowed my life to flow from what Spirit guides me to do, and not be so afraid about security and income and success and how it might look on the outside. And I am absolutely typical of near-death experiences. I'm nothing special. I've had some great opportunities, but they're all moving in the same direction.
Well, I think you're pretty special.
Thank you.
Well, I do, because I know maybe your near-death experience is typical from others, and you weren't given the choice, or maybe you were, of having it so young. But, from the inside out, you've only known your life, and you've lived it the way you've been kind of called to lead it. And I wrote down a few things as you're talking, because you're just like, oh, and then, I was a hospice doctor, and then came the book, and then the Hospital of Mercy, and the Touch, Love, and Compassion programs all over the country. Now, Tai Chi is programs in the country. And it's like, I'm thinking, wow, and so you're living in your own skin, and you've done a good job. I hope you know that anyways, but wow, what an incredible contribution you've been. Can I ask some questions about a few of those things you mentioned?
Hmm.
What was it like to be the hospice doctor? What did you is the word enjoy about it, or what made you feel like that you made a difference there?
Well, I think the thing that I personally love the most was that when a person, everyone I knew, and especially, in the inpatient unit where I spent a lot of time, everyone I knew were no longer having superficial conversations. We
Wow.
all moved beyond that. And so it was, to me, like souls meeting souls. And yes, I had all the competence to do the pain and symptom control, of course,
Right.
that goes with the training. But the part that is just so precious is the part of really feeling like two people are meeting at a soul-to-soul level, and that I'm sitting there with them knowing that for myself, if I were in their place, I'd have no fear. I would just want to be sure I was comfortable till I got home. And so I think that it really, my background, my near-death experience really set me up to be, to have that be a perfect match for me.
Did you ever share with either the people in hospice or the families about your near-death experience when you were younger?
Well, it's a funny story. I didn't intend to share. I was just doing hospice doctoring
Right.
to be a soul to soul without that. But we, one of our staff members, we were an interdisciplinary team. One of our team members thought it would be nice to have something on a bulletin board featuring different staff members, so that the people who were there, because they'd be there for a while,
Right.
that they would get to know us as people. And so when it was my turn, it happened that I had just done an article for the Houston Post about near-death experiences, and it talked about me and mine, that whole article. They put it on the bulletin board. So then everybody came to know that I was someone who'd had one, because it just stayed up. It was so popular. And so
I would think so.
it's just something where people could ask me about. They felt like, oh, this is fine to ask about. And because I think that was that little serendipity, that the synchronicity, if you will, that happened, that then allowed people to open up about experiences they were having that were unusual, such as as they approach death, having deceased relatives come to visit them, and to see them in their room, and to wonder if they're hallucinating or is this for real.
Wow.
I was able to reassure them and had the great experience of being able to be in the room with people, I'm remembering a particular person, while he was seeing a deceased relative, and when I walked in the room, he was talking to the relative, who was, of course, I didn't see.
Right.
I could see that he was, and I thought, I want to know if this is hallucination, because nearly everybody's on pain medication.
Sure. Right.
If this is hallucination, or is it something deeper? And so I interrupted him and asked him what he'd had for breakfast. And he was able to tell me. He stopped the conversation, told me what he had for breakfast, told me his pain on a scale of 1 to 10, and then politely dismissed me. And what I know about hallucinations as a doctor is that someone having hallucinations cannot do that. They cannot stop their hallucination, answer questions in a concrete, objective way, and then go back to their hallucination. That is not the way hallucinations work.
Wow.
So anytime anybody says that those experiences with deceased relatives is hallucination, they just haven't done the experiment.
Wow. I heard a story once, I think it's Thomas Edison, that just shortly before he passed away, he just whispered in his physician's ear, he's just, wow, it's really beautiful there. And he was somebody very scientific of mind, and he never spoke anything unless he knew it to be true. And it was as if he was seeing into heaven.
Yeah, and that's, more recently in this last year or two, that's what Steve Jobs said when he died. He went, wow. Oh, wow.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
That is so encouraging. And Pam, to have you as the doctor in that atmosphere when even on though it's a soul to soul level, there's all the family members around that have the fear and have all all that stuff that happens within families when someone's close to passing away, and just that you could be in that environment and bring that sense of calm and that conversation, having that hanging up about your near-death experience. I bet you put a whole bunch of people at peace and gave a lot of people hope.
I think it turned into a wonderful setting. It truly did, because all the nurses then felt open to share their experiences they were having with patients and what the patients were telling them. And so often you hear that patients talk to the nurse, but they never talk to the doctor. And that's just because the doctors, some of it's because the doctors aren't around.
Right.
Some of it is the doctors really don't want to hear it because they think they have to fix it.
Oh.
But it was wonderful to be in an environment where where everybody felt free to talk about it, and where we discovered as a group that when people started seeing deceased relatives, it really meant they were getting much closer to death. And in those last stages of life with hospice, it's really hard to know. People say, how many days do they have? And anybody who tells them is just a fool.
Yeah, there's no way of knowing.
There's no way of knowing. But it's a pretty good indicator when they start seeing deceased relatives that they're in their last few days of life. And so we would actually, in our checkout rounds between shifts, that would be part of checkout rounds, is who's seeing deceased relatives.
Wow.
And that's also, I want to just say, that's how common deceased relatives are. That not everyone sees them. In fact, we came to the point where people were saying, I know so-and-so had one, why can't I? But it's pretty common. I'd say maybe 40, 50%. It's quite common.
One of my friend's mothers just recently passed away, and um, moments before she died, she lifted her head out of off her pillow, and she just, with a smile, said, "Hello, hello," and she was turning her head, saying, greeting the invisible, and then she put her head down and passed away.
Ah, that's wonderful. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, Pam, I love talking with you. So, what's the book about?
So the book really is, the book, Love is the Link, is about my own experience, and then also the experiences that I had um, in the hospice, people's individual experiences.
Oh,
Um, some experiences much like the one you just described of seeing the deceased relative there at the last minute. And then I just recently updated it and just put in an extra chapter that kind of updates the fields of hospice near-death experience and complementary medicine. Um, that's gone on since I wrote the book the first time, because the book itself is people's stories. I didn't want to turn it into a lecture from me. I wanted it to
right.
be them giving an opportunity to share their stories one more time.
Well, stories I find make a difference. People have read books like Chicken Soup for the Soul, and to hear similar inspirational stories really, I think, tell a story that sinks in, that hits home, other
Hmm.
than someone just kind of professing their thoughts. Not that that's not good, but back it up with some stories. And I think that's probably what you're speaking of. And people love stories, and it,
Yeah.
it, it makes such a real difference. I'd love to hear a little bit about your touch, love, and compassion and what you created. My dad, you'll meet him someday in heaven. He's was
Hmm.
just an extraordinary, extraordinary man, and a giver and a wonderful person. Um, he worked with Bernie Siegel when he was alive. He had had cancer 30 years before his death, and it had disappeared after he worked with Bernie Siegel, and he went on to helping a lot of cancer patients and AIDS patients, and he's just a real gentle soul. My dad was, but where he passed away was in a hospital, in Danbury Hospital in Connecticut, and before that he had been a short time in hospice trying to get pain medication sorted out. He had a pain pump installed for a broken spine due to a tumor. But I'm just seeing a difference between the hospital, one hospital he was in, and the hospital where he passed away was such an a place that there was compassion, love, nurturing. There was a channel that had inspirational music and meditations on. On Sunday, there was a person that came in, played the harp. It was something like I didn't even expect could be in a hospital. And I don't know what you're going to say about your Touch, Love, and Compassion program, but I have a sneaky suspicion that you brought into a hospital something that wasn't there before that was very necessary in nurturing. So can you just share what is your touch, love, compassion that you
Yes, I'm
introduced?
glad it did. And to just say in 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 kind of in conversation about what you had said, is I love the way that hospitals are starting to bring those things in, and they're bringing them in more and more, and it's wonderful.
Mm,
So our program at Mercy in Durango is has as its basis helping people. I'm going to say it's because it's the theory of it, and it's what's important is helping people to realize that healing lies within them. They come in for the conventional medicine, but it's when they add their own body's ability to heal that they heal so much faster. So that's the theoretical basis of the TLC program. And what we do is we have an actual, and this is offered for free to anybody who's in the hospital who wants it. And we have a team that are trained in healing therapy, which is a kind of very gentle, hands-on, hands-off energy work that just helps a person come to calmness within themselves. And it's used with conscious breathing and with meditation and aromatherapy and the soft music to help a person just relax into themselves and to begin to elicit their own healing response. And when we were first developing it, of course, the administration and the doctors wanted proof that it was helpful in an objective way.
Right.
The best way to do that is to use the conventional measures of anxiety and pain on the 1 to 10 level.
Okay.
So we kept statistics for the first 3 years, and I reported them to the docs every quarter to prove that indeed when someone went in and had a TLC session, their pain level went down on the average of this is a scale of 1 to 10, it went down 3 to 4 notches.
That's an extreme amount of less pain.
Extreme amount of less pain. And anxiety, if they had anxiety, was the same way. And so what the nursing staff loved about it was that at the beginning, and this is how we kind of got buy-in from them, was that if they had a patient who just couldn't settle, and it's what in medicine they were always on the bell, always
Right.
ringing the nurse,
Uh-huh.
and they just couldn't get settled. They would bring in the TLC team, and it takes that it's a person, but they have a cart and everything, and it takes 30 to 45 minutes for a treatment. And my selling point to them was at least for 45 minutes they're not going to hit the bell. They've got somebody in there.
It's true.
So they were like, okay, Pam, I'll go for it. And what they found, though, was that it worked. It wasn't just the time the TLC team was in, but for many hours afterwards, they weren't calling the nurse again. So it meant that it was not just effective in the moment, but that it lasted for hours afterwards. And it has become one of the central features of the hospital. And on those satisfaction reports, that's the thing that people most often comment on is the TLC treatment. And it's changed the whole culture of the hospital, that people are kinder to one another. They treat each other more like that.
Wow.
And it's just been a good thing. And it led, this was started before a new hospital was built.
Mm-hmm.
It was started about 4 years before the new hospital was built. And when the new hospital was built in 2006, it was built with the idea of having it be a healing environment, which was becoming all the buzzword back then.
Yes.
But only becoming it. We had to look it up and how to do it. So that when it was built, it really does have the healing atmosphere, not the cold white walls, but it's got a very, very home-like atmosphere. And for me, the piece de resistance was that when they built it, they did a healing labyrinth outside that is wheelchair accessible, that can be used for meditation purposes in a beautiful xeriscaped garden that both the community and staff and family members and even patients can actually use the labyrinth. So it's created a whole total environment that began with the healing therapy.
And this spread, this TLC program spread to other hospitals, other programs?
It has in some ways. I'm not involved anymore because I start programs more than stay.
That's
But what I
okay. That's a gift.
but what I've heard is that some other hospitals have done it. There hasn't, and I'm sure that there are ones I don't know about.
Yep.
Um, but as part of the CHI, the Catholic Health Initiative group, and they always said we were the perfect storm of just the right community, the right people.
Right.
I don't know. I think it's more transferable than that.
I
But
think
at
so.
least it proves that in a 72-bed hospital in a small town, it can be done and it can be sustainable. It's been in operation now for, golly, a decade, over a decade.
Yeah. And I remember too, I don't remember specifically, but that was one of the services offered um, when my dad was in that hospital I was telling you
Yeah,
about. And I would just seem to think, and I'm no doctor, but if your body has less stress and is not in as much pain, there would be less pain medication and
yeah,
more comfort to the patient, and all good things stem from that.
absolutely. And the patients may even go home sooner,
Right.
be ready to go home sooner. But definitely, there's less pain medication, um, and and people, yeah, they do have less stress and they heal faster.
That's
Yeah, it's for
great.
sure, and there's actual physiologic correlates for all that. So it's not just a placebo effect, which sometimes people ask. But I would also say placebo effects are important. That shows how powerful the mind is.
Oh, definitely. No question. How did you get into Tai Chi?
By accident, as almost everything happened, I actually did a favor for a friend when I was medical director of the wellness department at Mercy in Durango. My friend wanted to have this new guy, Dr. Paul Lamb, who was coming to the United States from Australia, teach Tai Chi for health at a workshop in Durango. Well, it was his first time to the United States. I never heard of the Tai Chi for Health program, and he was going to places like L.A.
Mm-hmm.
So he said he's a nice man. He said he'd come if we can get 25 people to take the weekend workshop. So I convinced the wellness team, which is what we called ourselves before TLC. We were just developing it. I convinced them to go ahead and to do this workshop. So we were 15 of the 25, and he was able to come. Well, I just fell in love with the Tai Chi for Health, and the early studies, and they've continued to support it more and more, showed that that Tai Chi can help prevent falls in older adults. And as a
Oh,
family doc, I know that those falls in older adults lead to the disability that leads to death.
right.
And so anything that in fact, the single biggest cause predictor of death in the next year for a person over 70 is a hip fracture.
Sure.
So it's like a very big deal to prevent falls. And I loved it for myself, and it really helped the arthritis in my knees. And I just thought, it could be a good thing for as a family doc to go around teaching this and do talks on it and stuff. So I got involved with Dr. Lamb in his program, got trained by him, and have actually taught a lot of instructor workshops and done talks for state organizations and national organizations on why Tai Chi for older adults and how it also helps with arthritis. So, and that program has just sailed because it's so good. It really works. The studies are out there proving. Gosh, the latest studies show that it's a 70% reduction in falls in older adults.
7070?
7-0. It's amazing. And it's taken the world by storm, really. And now it's been approved by the CDC one of the two Tai Chi programs that is known to prevent falls. So now it's something that can get grants and everything else. So it's just been this huge thing, and it's truly helpful to people. And then, on a side note, yes, it prevents falls. There's no doubt about it. Yes, it helps with the pain and stiffness of arthritis. The studies show it.
Sure. Probably with balance too.
Yeah, and balance is the big thing.
Yeah.
Balance, the reason you don't have falls is because of the balance and strength in the legs.
Mm-hmm.
But the big thing for me also as a near-death experiencer is that when people really do that slow, measured movement with the focus on the breath,
Yeah.
they fall into a deeper place in themselves than they knew was possible. So they
Oh.
come for an exercise class, and they go home, of course, with stress reduction, but they go home with a deeper connection to the deeper parts of themselves. And those are the people that would never go to meditation. They don't even know they want it.
Aren't you clever?
Oh, right.
Well, I know too, one of the things that I talk about in my book, because I talk about my life after death journey, but I also have a chapter about grief and easing the pain of grief. And one of the practices is getting into the present moment. And it doesn't necessarily have to be sitting in meditation, but even out for a walk, just concentrating on the leaves or the grass or the flowers, or if you're listening to music, just kind of being one with the music, listening to the words. And, my secret strategy is I too know that with the quiet mind or even focusing on the breath can tap people into a larger part of themselves. Um, and I believe kind of our divine selves, and that there's a magical connection when we can slow the thoughts and just be. So I kind of do the same thing a little bit differently. But I want to ask you too, Pam, because time goes by so fast. When we're talking about the powers of the mind, can you tell me a little bit about how you got involved with transformational hypnotherapy and what that is?
Transformational hypnotherapy is the other word for it is alchemical hypnotherapy. And what it does is it helps people. The process of the facilitator is to help a person decide, come to what questions do they want to work on. What is the deepest question they have today? And then to go to the parts of themselves, to get in deeper into themselves, to discover the answers or clues to the answers about that question. And what I love about transformational hypnotherapy versus more conventional is that it's not about what the therapist does. The therapist is really there to assist a person getting deeper into themselves. It's not the therapist doing something to you, but it's the therapist just opening your own doors to go deeper into yourself to be able to do your own work. And I was introduced to it, again, by accident.
You think these are all accidents. I have a sneaky suspicion. It's funny because my day job is I'm a chef for race car teams, and I can literally stand on my feet 20 hours and cook like nobody's business. I have stamina and strength and stuff. And so I very playful say that, there was this message that needed to be shared on planet Earth, and whether you call it God or the universe looked down and said, well, look at this girl. Look how strong she is. Look what she does. Let's give it to her. And I get the same playful image of you. Well, let's give her this. She'll think it's just some accident that she fell into, but we know what she does with good things. She shares them.
And that's probably true because these things have all been easy because they were right in my face kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah, so yeah, it was. There was a person used to have a ran a whole school for transformational hypnotherapy, the alchemical hypnotherapy in Denver. She moved to Pagosa, and she wanted to do a class, and she invited me, and I thought, oh, why not?
Why not?
And so then it turned into this long, it's a lot of training. I don't want to dismiss it as a lot of training. But it was extensive training. But it was all here in Pagosa, which made it easy. And so I could do it right at home. And I have, and then I've been doing some of that, and then that really sort of tossed me into this interesting thing I'm particularly jazzed about right now, which is the life between lives.
What does that mean?
Yeah, that is a whole nother field developed by Michael Newton. And I guess I should give credit to alchemical hypnotherapy. Is David Quigley's work. The life between lives is a kind of hypnotherapy of helping a person go to before they were born and the decisions they made about what they wanted to work on in this lifetime.
Cool.
And I believe that. I believe that we do come for a purpose. I recognize not everyone does, but that's my belief, is that really and truly we come for a purpose, and it's possible to get off course, and it's possible to not do it. The good news is if we don't do it, we'll just come back. So it's not that heavy. But to know what one's life purpose is to really have more of a sense of purpose, and to know that everything contributes to it. And I do agree with you. I called mine accidents, but I think of them as synchronicities.
Yeah.
It's that my life's purpose was to early on remember who I was. And that then, therefore, opened up everything for me to do everything I've done. Because knowing that stretch, that you're such a soul for so long, each lifetime it can be a real joy and can be an opportunity to continue to grow and to stretch one's soul in different directions. And even when they're difficult lifetimes, we truly are stretching our souls, even though it hurts in the moment.
We are getting close to being time is up, but I want to just ask you to expand on that last thing you said a little bit, because there are some people right now that are going through a real tough time, whether it's loss of a loved one or just dealing with a incredible hardship or suffering right now. In maybe, do you have any advice that you could look at it from kind of the life between lives perspective of maybe why or a good way for them to get their head around what they're going through and put it in perspective, as opposed to we often hear so many times that and we know personally that it's easy to become a victim and spend 40 years suffering. But is there a way to get somebody on track with maybe putting in perspective what they might be going through?
Something comes to my mind, and that is that I've just turned 70, and I'm looking back on my life, and I've had some very difficult times. And when I look on those times where I thought all was lost, now from the vantage point of a lady who's getting older, I could see that those pains, that difficult time, was absolutely essential to my growth, to who I was going to be in the future, and that I am simply a part of the tapestry of everyone else's life, and that we're all in this together, and that no one is alone. We're all in this together. We all have our times of pain, and when we're in them, it can feel like it lasts forever.
It sure does. But you know what? It also feels like we're alone.
Yeah, and we're not. We're not. Every single person on this earth has had pain and has lost someone and something that really mattered. And each of us, I think of it when it happens to me, I am taking my turn. And sometimes my turn seems like it lasts a really long time.
It does, doesn't it? How about Pam, just quickly, some of the people that there's a lot of relationships that have been destroyed or severed with loss of a loved one. There's been marriages come apart when a child dies. There's a lot of friction. And can we assume that perhaps the other person might have signed up to play their role the way they are because of some learning for them and also some learning for us in this lifetime?
Yes, I absolutely believe that we are all learning, and that in reincarnation we come back again and again playing different roles, same souls playing different roles in each other's lives, and sometimes those can be very harsh roles.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean, I don't I am a stand that people say the things they need to say when they're here on earth. They make amends, they forgive both themselves and others, and do your best for healing and harmony. I really am a stand for that. But I think there's many of us that try as we might, other people have their own opinions, and there's nothing we can do. And so I think it's a nice empowering way to just have faith and say, well, maybe they signed up to play this role. What am I getting out of it? And still be a stand for harmony. Um,
And stand for oneself.
yeah,
Um, sometimes sometimes relationships are meant to sever, and in the moment it can be really painful.
hmm
Long run, it's in everyone's best interest, and to know that that happens as often as not
and
when relationships sever.
yeah, and ultimately, in the big picture, if
Yeah,
we don't die, it's all going to be okay. Right?
yeah, it
We'll
is.
we'll play these cards again with different roles. Like you said, if you don't get it right this time, you'll get an opportunity to do it again. So, you know,
I
I,
asked is that if I might as well do it right this time
you
because I
might
know it.
as well. Exactly. That's so funny. That gives you good
I
reason
can do it now.
not to procrastinate. Pam, is there anything left unsaid that you're burning to say? Um, or we might just conclude this. Any last bits of wisdom or anything coming to mind?
I'm wanting to circle back to the beginning,
Hmm.
to my own near-death experience, and just remind us all that in the end, it's that sense of peace, surrounded by God, without all the details of this life. And sometimes that's a great comfort when we're in the middle of a whole mess of details.
Yeah, can
And
you
to
just
just,
say that again,
yeah, that
just
at
so we
the
get it?
end, when we go back home,
Uh-huh.
we are the souls that we are, surrounded by God and all the other souls that they are, and all the strife and all the pain, all the questions and all the details of this life are past. They're like, we look down and there's this stream that went through some little piece of who we really are, and that's all they are in the end.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. That's a beautiful way to close the show. Pam Kircher, thank you, thank you, thank you. And your website, if I can share it, is pamkircher.com, which is PAMKIRCHER.com. Or on We Don't Die Radio, I have a lovely picture of Pam and a short bio about her, and just below her picture, you can press the play button. And as Pam said earlier, like in her book, she shares stories, And stories really do make a difference. And if this episode's made a difference for you, certainly I encourage you to listen to some of the others because there's some really great stories of not only why some of the guests believe in life after death, but how to live a powerful life now. And feel free to share. Share, 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 share. Sharing is good. So I'm going to conclude this show. I really want to thank you for being here. Thank you, Pam, for giving us your time. And you're so darn inspirational. And I'm so glad that by accident you found all those wonderful blessings that you've given to so many other people. I just love that about you. I do.